So one other condition that I would like to just show really quick, and Dan, you can probably talk to this a little bit while I find the video, but we spent a lot of time this last summer at FireFly and the R300 working in Peat. And up until this summer, we hadn't done a lot of peat with our roll machine. We've done a lot of peat with our, not peat, but a similar condition they call muck for Florida for slabs. So we knew our machine had good weight balance and good ground pressure to handle the very soft conditions. But we spent a lot of time throughout the Midwest this last summer refining our ability to be the very best peat harvesting machine there is. And that's all machines. I'm confident to say we can handle peat conditions better than anything. Dan, do you want to give a little bit of thoughts about your experience in the peat with the R300?
So people that cut peat know that peat is probably one of the most difficult conditions to cut, and it changes so much when it comes to the moisture level in the ground. You know, dry peat behaves completely different than moderately wet peat, and really wet peat behaves different than all of it too. I will say that I've learned a lot about cutting peat, and I learned a lot from people that have been cutting it for a long time too. When we were demoing in the peat, you know, we spent some time up at a farm really dialing in the machine, learning what it would take to cut that condition really well. And I think we came up with some really good options on how to handle those conditions. You know, one thing that I'll say about cutting peat, you know, up until now, the FireFly, most people have been using auto stacks to cut their peat, and there's probably a good reason for that. One is they worked, and two is they had really good flotation to get across it. But I will say one thing that I learned about peat is, you know, driving on the grass with your machine is not always ideal. We were doing a demo at a farm in Wisconsin, and he, you know, just like I always say that when we go do demos at farms, it's a challenge to say the least, because we always get put in the most difficult condition. You know, they want to see what the machine will do in their condition. And they always take us to probably even stuff that they wouldn't normally harvest and sell, but they want to see if the machine will handle it. Well, that's what this case was on this one farm in Wisconsin. We went into this peat section of the field that was so soft that he wasn't even cutting it with his auto stack anymore because it was so soft. In fact, he had driven on it with his auto stack. And for those of you that know peat, in this particular condition, it was actually separating the grass from the soil underneath. And it was like a throw rug on top of the soil that you could just go and lift it up. And so anywhere that it had been driven on, it damaged the grass to the point where the roots were actually separating from the soil, and you had like a blanket on top of it. And I liken it unto, it's like there was a rug on top of water. That's what it was like, because it was like floating on top of it as you went through it. So we cut these conditions, and I was struggling a little bit with the condition where he had already driven on it with his auto stack. And as soon as I got away from his wheel track, it was clicking him off perfect. And it was because, you know, it wasn't waving up separated from the soil in front of it. So I learned something, that being able to cut at an efficient rate with a machine that handles the peat and floats well, not driving on the grass, was really important, because I wasn't damaging the grass prior to harvesting it to a point where you couldn't really even harvest it. As soon as I got out of his wheel truck, cut perfect. And so, you know, the peat is a very difficult condition to say the least, but I think we've got a really good machine working in that condition now.